Hello and welcome back to another chess game analysis. This is the second video of this series, and today I brought you a very instructive game in my opinion that features a very nice endgame again. I played on chess.com. I played the black pieces in a blitz game against Fight52, about 1600 rated player, and this was a blitz game, so my opponent in this game opened with d4. I played knight to f6, then he played c4, going into the main line, still leaving myself open if I play a king's Indian defense or a Grunfeld Indian with the move g g6 in this position. He played very normal chess, knight c3, and now d5, indicating the Grunfeld Indian defense. In the last video, I showed you a game where my opponent didn't immediately take the pawn. Here in this game, he just immediately took the pawn. C takes d5. It's a good move. And after knight takes d5, he immediately removed my knight from the center, gaining a tempo on the knight. Knight takes on c3 and b takes on c3. So we basically reach a mainline Grunfeld Indian defense. A little bit better play from white perspective than what we saw yesterday in the other video. I played c5. Also possible is immediately going for this bishop g7 idea, but it's mostly a change of move order. It mostly doesn't really matter, so I immediately attacked the center. So my opponent went ahead with knight to f3, and now I flank my bishop on the long diagonal, bishop g7, and we have this very nice tactic. My opponent played bishop d2, which is a good move. We again have this very nice tactic that if you advance the pawn to d5, there is this very nice fork. Bishop captures on c3, winning the rook, and in this position, if you advance the pawn, you get the same as if you capture on c5. Both are equally bad because you just lose the rook in both variations. So my opponent played bishop to e2, which is quite a relaxed move, not really going for any complications immediately, and preparing to castle. So in this position, I just developed another piece with knight c6, and another attacker is on the pawn, which needs defending. Bishop to e3 defends the pawn. A very equal position at this point and still very much theory. So here I castled. So castling isn't an inaccuracy. So the engine in this position actually wants me to go with bishop g4, immediately attacking the knight, which is defending this d4 pawn. And we really want to play in the Grunfeld Indian defense. We really want to pressure the center, and this is a very nice developing move. And it should have been played in this position as an alternative, but castling brings the king to safety and nothing is lost in this position. You can always develop the bishop, and after castling, I took in the center, c takes d4, he recaptures, c takes d4, and now I bring out this bishop to a very nice active g4 square, attacking the knight and indirectly pressuring this pawn even more, because one of the defenders of the pawn can already, in this position, can always be removed, so white needs to be careful here. He played rook to b1, which is an inaccuracy. He wants to get out of this diagonal, and I understand that from a human perspective, but I still wanted to show you a very nice line that I thought was quite interesting. In this position, some games have been played on Grandmaster level, and the engine agrees actually with this very nice pawn push d5. And when I saw this, it was a little bit strange because I didn't really see the idea behind it. This just loses a rook on the spot, but let me show you a very nice continuation for white. So let's say you take the rook, which is a good move. Queen takes on a1, and now you need to move this knight because it's attacked, and the knight can move, for instance, to a5, and now we activate another piece, bishop to h6, and now our rook is actually attacked, and there is the threat of checkmate. So if you just move the rook away, queen to g7 is just going to be checkmate. So you can't really move the rook. You need to give the exchange back that you have just won. Playing f6, which is obviously a nasty move to play because you never play f6 basically in chess. Everyone knows that rule. And after bishop takes, king takes, the engine gives an advantage of +2, so white is technically better, even though the material is equal, but just doesn't really look nice. You have a very stranded knight here, and white has space advantage and has very easy play in this position. So white is better, and this has happened in a couple of Grandmaster games as well. So you could technically still call it theory, but I absolutely understand my opponent who just wanted to get rid of all these tactics on this long diagonal with this bishop, because it was quite a complicated line to calculate, but I still wanted to show it to you that in this position d5 would have been a very nice idea. So now I get some counterplay in this position. After this rook to b1, I take the knight, which is defending the d4 pawn, and now bishop captures, knight captures. Some move orders could have also be exchanged, but I thought this was quite an easy way to get rid of material. Queen takes on d4 and the rook takes on b7. So a lot has been traded here and the position is balanced, even though black is slightly better because my activity is just better, and I can bring my pieces into the game. e6, and now the queen is activated. Queen to b3, queen to e5, g3, rook from f to b8, and now the position slowly gets to a position where it's kind of balanced. I don't think that I can really play for a win in this position, so I trade off more material. I would be alright. From the rating perspective, I would gain some elo with a draw, especially playing with the black pieces. I would be happy in this position with a draw, so I traded even more material. At this point, even sacrificing this pawn for the activity. Queen takes on a7, and the position is absolutely balanced here. You can always hold this a pawn in this position because of the opposite colored bishop. So if everything is traded off, you will still be able to hold this as black. I centralized my queen. We move back and forth a little bit. Queen to b6, queen to d4. I try to trade off the queens. He pushes a4, which is okay. But now I attack the queen, which is not that great of a move, but we were still even playing with increment in this endgame. We were quite low on time, so we didn't spot all the ideas. So he trades the queens, and now we see with this opposite color bishops, the dark squares can always be defended, so there is no way that this pawn can actually push through. So he tried to push it, a5. So in this position I go in front of the pawn, rook to a6, stopping the pawn, and he tries to attack my bishop, but now the rook and the pawn get forked, and we exchange basically everything. And in this position I win back the pawn, but opposite color bishop endgame, it should be a draw in this position. And I wouldn't have... So there is still a twist in this position. It should be on both sides. If both sides play equally well and find the best moves, it should be a draw, but that's not what happened in this game. There were still some chances left, and I wanted to show you some very nice variations. So first of all, both kings reach the center of the board, and we improve our pieces. Pretty much endgame theory, if you want to call it like that. And now I try to create some weaknesses here. This is a very nice dark square pawn chain that he's got, and I try to dislocate some of the pawns here. So he tries to shut down my bishop, which is okay with e5. I push another pawn, g5, king goes closer to my pawns, and now, very nice idea, I attack this pawn here with my bishop, and you realize that the pawn can't really be defended. But it doesn't really matter, because in this position, with the opposite color bishops, it's still a draw. So he plays bishop to h5, sacrificing the pawn in this position. But it doesn't really matter, it's still... he can lose a pawn in this position, it's still equal. And now we reach a very interesting position. He can definitely hold this position if he lets his bishop be active and find back into the game, but that's not what he did. He played g4, and now you immediately see the engine evol bar over here. Black is actually winning. The engine gives -60. It's a huge mistake because the idea is that you basically, yes, the pawn is no longer being attacked by the bishop. It's on a light square now, but you basically play with a whole piece less because this bishop can't get back into the game. It has 3 squares that it can actually go to in this position. One is your own pawn that you can't capture, and on these squares it's just gonna get captured by the black king. So basically he shut down his only piece in this position, which the engine actually says it's completely winning. And I saw the next move, which is a good move, h3, and now you realize that 2 of black's pawns on the E and the H file are pretty far away from each other, so the king can't defend both of these pawns, and both of these pawns are on dark squares, so my bishop can attack them, which is very nice. And the king is not fast enough in this position to defend everything, so that's why the engine says it's completely winning. And he attacked my bishop, and now in this position I want to ask you to pause the video if you want to solve it for yourself. Black is completely winning, and there is one move in this position that completely crushes white's position and forces resignation, basically. Pause the video and try to find it. It's a very nice move and very instructive as well. So I hope you have paused the video and you found bishop to e1, which is a great move in this position. So the king actually wants to stay with his h-pawn, but it's kind of a Zugzwang situation. The bishop can't move, the pawns can't move. The only piece that can move is the king, and the king has to go away from his h-pawn that he wants to protect. So in this game, in this variation, king to e2 would have been played, and now you can try to find the next move. This is actually the move that you needed to find in order to play bishop to e1. The next move basically wins the game on the spot. You can also pause the video here and try to find it. So I hope you have paused in this position, and I hope you have found bishop g3, a great move in this position, and it just sacrifices the bishop. But let's look at the position a little bit closer. So let's look at the position where white actually takes the sacrificed piece with h takes g3. So we have pushed the king farther away from the h file in the previous move. So in this position, just h2, king f1, and h1 queen, and black is completely winning, having a queen advantage. This is basically resignable for white. So in this position, this is why you could also try to decline the sacrifice by just moving with king f1, but it's not really that much better. It's a little bit more resilient, but in this position you have multiple options how to win this game, because still this bishop is never gonna be active in this game again. So you're basically playing with 2 pawns more after bishop takes h2 and a bishop more. So this is completely winning. For instance, you could, after king f2, take this e pawn, and after king g1, these pawns are gonna push forward and they're gonna promote. The king can't stop both of these pawns, and this is basically winning. And you have another option. You can, in this position, you can actually take on h2, or you could actually also take on e5, king g1, bishop to f4, king h1, e4, e5, king g1, e4, and the pawn is just gonna push down the board, and white can't stop the pawn. Otherwise, if he wants to stop the pawn, he's gonna lose this pawn, and this pawn is gonna promote. So a very nice idea in this position. Bishop e1, king e2, and the sacrifice of the bishop. In this position, bishop g3. So the problem in this position, after king f3, so the problem in this position is I didn't spot this idea. I was basically low on time. I had 1 minute remaining, so I did not find this very nice instructive idea of sacrificing the bishop. I played bishop g1, which is a mistake, and it basically draws the game, which is unfortunate, but I still wanted to show you this very nice continuation of how you could still have turned around this drawish looking endgame. So in the game it continued with king g3, bishop goes over there, attacks this pawn, and after captures. You see that I basically still managed to hold my 1 pawn advantage, but it's not gonna matter too much because the game is basically drawn. King g2, bishop f4, h3, bringing the pawn to a light square again, not being able to being attacked, and e5. I tried to push and I tried to create some initiative because I still tried to push for the win. I thought it might be possible, but with best defense it is drawn. King f3, king f6, king e4, centralizing the king, king e6, king d3, f4, f5, and now the bishop gets activated, but at some point, if I want to activate my king, I have to let that bishop out. Takes, and now the table bases kick in, and the table bases say with these 7 pieces on the board, this is a draw with perfect play. So let's see a very nice instructive moment also how my opponent, 5-2, actually managed to hold this with a very nice setup that I think it's quite instructive. I bring my king closer, he gives a check. I try to get the initiative here, moving the king a little bit closer to the action. And in this position, we reach a very nice position here, where basically I move king c3, and now he has reached this perfect setup where the pawn and the king are on light squares, and this bishop just moves along the diagonal, and black can't make progress despite the extra pawn. You can never push the pawn forward because it's just gonna get captured, and black is out of moves. You can't really make progress in this position. So we moved back and forth a little bit. I tried to create something, but you just realize he just moves his bishop back and forth. So yes, he just moves back and forth between these 2 squares, and I can't make progress. And it was in this position that we agreed to a draw, and I think this is quite a fair result for this game. And it's quite instructive, in my opinion, how he just manages to hold this being down a pawn, but with the opposite color bishop endgame. It's always quite tricky. I wanted to show you this as a addition to my last video, where I basically showed you how you could actually win by being 1 or 2 pawns ahead in the Grunfeld Indian defense. So in this position, it was not possible for me to win, and I think it's a good result and a very instructive game, in my opinion. So I hope you have learned something. I have certainly learned something from analyzing this game, and I hope you're also looking forward to the next video. You can give me suggestions on what I should analyze in the comments down below. I hope you like and follow and subscribe, and follow my Twitch as well. I stream chess sometimes on Twitch. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye.